Hey friends, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again today. I am, as you can see, finishing a painting that I started last Saturday, 2 days ago, in downtown Raleigh. And I don't call this touching up a plein air painting because I was definitely not finished the other day. So this is definitely finishing a plein air painting. I've been doing a few things to it before I started this broadcast. Not much, mostly just a few details up here near the top. And I'm finally ready to move along, I hope fairly quickly. I hope to finish fairly quickly and invite you to follow along as I do so. When I am teaching my technique, let me just admit right up front that one of the weaknesses perhaps of my teaching is that my students don't get a whole lot of information about this phase of the painting process. Now, there's a reason. There's a reason for that. Even though I'm apologizing for it. There's a reason. So again, I invite those of you who've maybe taken a painting class from me or are thinking about it. The reason I don't go into great length about this step or this phase of the painting process is quite simple, because I consider everything that I'm doing in this final phase that I call final edit, light opaque highlights. Basically, I'm painting opaque, essentially translucent and opaque. In other words, I'm painting at this point like every other traditional oil painter, traditional especially in the last 100 years, traditional oil painter who paints essentially straight out of the tube paint, because that's essentially what I'm doing. Does that make sense? So I in my classes, I tend to emphasize the part of my painting technique that is unusual. One might even say weird. Okay? The first 13 steps, if there are 13, that's just a approximate. The first 13 steps of Dan Nelson's painting approach to painting are kind of strange. It's only the last one step that is ordinary painting. So anyway, so you don't have to watch this. Isn't that good to know? You do not have to watch. Oh, I just missed somebody's comment, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. Because everything I'm doing here is pretty standard. But I'll go ahead and tell you what I'm doing anyway, okay? At the moment, as you can see, I'm working on trees. Now, I do have a thing or two to say about painting foliage. What a weird word, foliage. Foliage. And that is that you render believable foliage in stages and in layers. So that's certainly what I've been doing in this painting up until this point. Layer, layer, layer. But the one thing I really want to say is that at least myself, and I think many other people as well, left to our own devices, so to speak, left to our own tuition, we tend to make the contrast in the foliage too extreme. In other words, like what I'm doing right now, I'm coming back with a lighter green on top of what's already there. Now, down here I have trees in the sunlight, and this tree's in the shade, so you see light, dark. This tree's also in the sunlight, so I have a kind of a sandwich here. Light, shade, light, dark, light. The tops of this tree, the very tops of it are catching rays of the sun, but all the rest of the tree is in shadow. But sunlight or shadow, I think one of the things that we artists tend to do, and this goes along very much with, I mentioned just the other day, with Mark Carter, who's a very good online teacher. He says the most common mistake that students tend to make is over contrast, exaggerating contrast. And I'm just saying that in particular, when we're painting leaves on trees, I believe we tend to do that. We artists, we're sensitive, we see the contrast, and in the act of seeing, we tend to exaggerate. When we're painting, we crank, so to speak, as if we're if we're in Photoshop, we crank up the contrast. Partly just because we enjoy it so much and we can see it when other people see it. So there you go. I'm nearly done, I think, with those trees. I was using the green, maybe you could see, to carve out, to paint the lamppost. It wasn't very clear just a minute ago. I've made it more. In fact, I'm going to skinny it up just a little bit more. This is a favorite trick of mine, and I think should be a favorite trick of yours. Any chance you get to negative paint something instead of positive paint it. That is, instead of rendering the object by painting it, instead render the object by painting what's behind it, around it. Anytime you can do that, do it, because our eyes really enjoy that. Okay, now I'm satisfied with the color that I just put on that green, but there's too much of it. In other words, our eye intuits, sees all this and says, that's all the same color, and that's irksome. Can I use a good old-fashioned word? That's irksome, bothersome to the visual part of our brain. We go, ooh. And also, I think there's something like, we get the feeling that the artist just got lazy, which I did, which I would. So we want to see a different color on top of the green that there's too much of. Does that make sense? There's too much. Anytime you use one color and cover a fairly large area of the canvas, there's several bits of the canvas here and there. Anytime you do that, it's a good idea to come back with a color slightly, and that's an important word, slightly lighter than what you just put down. Come back and do something slightly lighter on top of it. I've said that so many times, some of you are getting sick of it. And others of you are still waiting for the light bulb to come on and go, and for you to say, golly, he's right. I think that was shades of Gomer Pyle there, just in case you wondered. Hey, let me make sure that my sound's coming in the right place here. Oh, it is not. I'm sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. Bad sound for a while there. Sorry about that. You could probably hear me. I just sound a little far away, I imagine. Okay, just a little bit more highlight on these trees, and I think I'm done with the green. I could be done, but I'm going to do something else. I mentioned this the other day when I was out painting. When you have a row of trees or a bank of trees, it's a good idea, and I told you the other day how I learned this in particular from Thomas Kinkade, and that sent me off into my long Thomas Kinkade tirade. That is, the tirade is, don't be a snob. You can learn something from everybody. Learn something from everybody. Criticize nobody. You can evaluate, but you don't criticize. Compare yourself to no one. I woke up this morning thinking about that. Don't judge anybody. But for me, even more important than that is don't compare yourself to anybody. And that's hard. At least it's hard for me. Right? Like I'm a natural born comparer. That is my native tongue, man. And so I'm really working hard to stop that. Don't compare. Yes, Toby, thank you for saying that. That's exactly right. Thomas Kinkade did some beautiful plein air work. He was a good. Hello, Bobo Pop. Nice to hear from you also. Yeah, and so Thomas Kincaid, he decided to do with his skill what he did. Who are you or I to judge? Maybe that's exactly why he was put on the planet. Okay, I'm gonna call it quits on the green trees for now. And I thought I was pretty close to done back here, but I don't think I am. I think I can push it a little bit further. I'm liking the way those trees look, by the way. Oh, the last thing I did, I was told you the trick from Thomas Kincaid, and then I didn't tell you what I was doing. I mixed up another color of green in here that was browner, a redder, browner green. A redder green, right? Only an artist would say something like a redder green. So I'm assuming I'm speaking to fellow artists most of the time. You could also say, of course, a more neutral or less intense green. Of course, that would be appropriate as well. Let me come in here. I talked about this quite a bit the other day, this building, which is our Capitol building, the capital of North Carolina. You know, we don't have very many old world-ish classic architecture buildings in North Carolina. You know, we're in the New World, right? We don't have that many. But our Capitol building is one, so I enjoy painting it. The point that I was making the other day is that when I was out there painting, there was no shadow coming down across the building at that angle. Are you with me? That is completely fictitious. That is a complete invention on my part. There was no shadow whatsoever. Well, why did I put it there? Because I knew it would look cool. That's all. Now I'm aided by, in that consideration, by a good deal of a track record of experience. I know that it's going to look good. It's not like, I wonder if it would look good. No. I know it's going to look good because I've done it enough times to know. So I invite you to join me in that. You don't have to wonder. The principle, I'm repeating myself again, the principle especially comes out when you're painting buildings in a town or a city, any kind of building. Don't paint flat planes, flat surfaces. Flat, don't paint them flat. They are flat, don't paint them flat. You have to have, not have to, but it's better to have it graduate from dark to light in some way. And in this case, just in a completely invented shadow cutting right across. It just makes the whole painting. Now, while I'm at it, down here in the faraway corner of this painting, let's do a little bit else. So this front, that's a little too white. Let's warm that up. The front of this building right here, I want it to be lighter at the bottom than it is up here. I'm talking about just this plane, this little plane right here. Not those two, but this plane right here. Even that one, I don't want it flat. I want it going somewhere. This plane, light to dark. This one, light, dark to light. This big one here. Let me open up. This, I know you're getting terrible glare, but this is a major plane. Goes, as you can see very clearly, from dark to light in spite of the glare. Let me try to pick you up so you can see it for just a second. There you go. Likewise, this building right here, light to dark. So you just basically make a rule. Every rule can be broken, but you make the rule that every flat plane is going to receive a graduated treatment of some kind. Light to dark, dark to light, warm to cool, something like that. Now let me come in here at the end of this street. Again, the other day when I was out painting, I thought that I had done enough glow way back here. But now that I'm here looking at it with fresh eyes, I'm going, oh no, 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 no. That can stand a lot more glow than what you've got there. And of course, where there is glow, there are soft edges. Where there is glow, there is soft edges. If you want it to look like the sun is just making it even, it already was soft, and making it even softer. I want it to look like the sun is coming on the far side of one of these buildings down the street and hitting. And that, in fact, is pretty realistic. I have invented a new thing here. I clamped a yardstick on the back of my easel so that I could tape my reference. So here's what I'm looking at right here. See how that bright spot right there? That's what I'm responding to. I'm not trying to render it realistically per se, but I am trying to reflect that explosive sense of sunlight. All the edges down here are so soft, it would be very inappropriate in this world of painting, in this world of quote-unquote real painting. Forgive me, all you super realists, forgive me for being such a snob, but I call this real painting. It would be very inappropriate for me to try to indicate individual cars, pedestrians, anything like that. No, it's just an explosion of light back there. I'm gonna, well, no, hang on, I'm gonna go one step brighter. And some headlights. And some headlight reflection on the road. Hey, speaking of Thomas Kinkade, speaking nicely of Thomas Kinkade, here is a little trick that I clearly learned from him. I want you to see the whole painting again. That would be better. Can I do this? Let's see how that looks. Yeah, okay. So it's obviously an evening, the sun's setting to our left, we're looking north. It's an evening sky, and there's still blue sky up here, so it's in the summertime 7 o'clock-ish, a 7 o'clock-ish kind of light, right? But, light back on, down here on Main Street, in the shadow, this is more like a 8 o'clock light. and in other words, I'm cheating realism here. This is not a touch of realism. This is a touch of exaggeration, where I am, and I'm going to do the same thing with the lights coming out through the store windows is going to be like in other words, what I'm saying is this lighting down here technically doesn't match the lighting in the sky. That makes sense? It's too early in the day for lights down here to show up this much. Well, then how come you're doing it? The answer, class, is why? Because it looks cool. Okay, now, first of all, if you're an artist, you may pick up on a discrepancy like that. Like when as soon as the first time I saw Thomas Kinkade paintings 20 years ago, I'm having a Thomas Kinkade moment here. You bear with me. When I first saw his paintings, I said, wait a minute, there's like 14 different sources of light in that landscape. I'm exaggerating just to be funny, right? He had the lights were not accurate, not realistic at all. Okay, girls, let Daddy hear, but you can't make squeaky sounds, okay? I've just been joined by the two most fantastic, two of the three most fantastic granddaughters in the whole world, right? Okay, you guys want to see them. Okay, wait. There you go. Wave. Tali and Lakey. Wait, this camera up here. This one up here. There you go. Aren't they gorgeous? Aren't they sweet? They are very sweet. Especially when they're well behaved. Anyway, so did you catch that? Oh, only you artists would discern, wait a minute, that sky and those headlights and that sky don't match. If the sky's this bright, the headlights wouldn't be this blah, 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 blah. But you're sensing that because you're very visually astute. Most non-artists would never ever put that together at all. Okay, till I point it out, and then they go, oh yeah. I'm doing taillights at the moment, and I have something to say about taillights too. Been a while since I did this little lecturette, miniature lecture. Here it is. How do you draw, especially something that's red, that look like it's glowing, like a light bulb, like a tail light? Same thing with street light, stoplights. How do you give the impression that they're glowing? I've done it there. Let me pick you up and give you an earthquake ride just for a minute. I think I've done a pretty good job of indicating headlights that are glowing. Got it? Looks like a wet street. That's always a nice thing when you're doing it. It's one of those tricks. It's one of those tricks. People like to see wet pavement. Why? There's a very real answer to that question. Why do people get a kick out of seeing wet pavement? It's very simple. Because all human beings get a kick out of seeing play of light. We enjoy seeing light doing things. Not mild things, but dramatic things. So when we see reflection, we go, ooh, look at that reflection. Whether we say those words or not. Does that make sense? The viewer goes, oh, look at that reflection. And it's not so much, I don't think, because they're nostalgic for rainy days. They're not going, oh, I remember that one time I was caught in the rain. It was so much fun. No. If anything, they say, I was caught in the rain. It wasn't any fun. I joke often, I say, we human beings are funny. We like to see paintings of other people caught in the rain. But we don't like to be caught in the rain ourselves. No, that's not what's happening. What is actually happening is all human beings everywhere get a kick out of seeing play of light. And one of the most dramatic plays of lights is reflection, water reflection. That's also part of the reason why we get such a kick out of seeing painting seascapes and water, as we get a kick out of the interplay. Water interacts so intensely with light, or light interacts intensely with water. So reflection on the wet street, almost always a winner, whether it's there or not. And the other day when I was out painting, it most certainly was not there. Uh-oh, girls. Lake, try not to make Tali want to yell, okay? And Tali, please don't yell. If you want to yell, you have to go to my room. Turned around, they'd already gone. They know the rules. Good for them. Once again, we don't get points, quote unquote, for how carefully or realistically we render all of this stuff back here. You don't get points for that. I'm using a funny term just to make the point. We don't get points. We get points for putting down marks that are first and foremost just interesting in and of themselves. They're confident, they're strong brush strokes, they're pleasant. They look like they were put down on purpose. They don't look like they were overworked, fiddly. They were put down. That's what we get credit for. And if the marks that we put down look like, sort of like, I guess that's a good way to put it, they look sort of like something. Like, that looks sort of like lights coming, between trees or tree trunks or something like that. Yes, that is correct. That's what, when I say we get credit, that's what cranks the aesthetic, turns the aesthetic crank in our viewer's mind or brain. Now, again, I know I probably talk about it too much, but if we do hyperrealism, the viewer is impressed, and yes, indeed, it is a form of aesthetic pleasure. When we look at a super realistic image, knowing that a human being has rendered it, it's not a camera, it's not that they did it by hand, we do get a form of aesthetic pleasure from that. We go, golly, look at that, that's amazing. But it's a big part of the aesthetic pleasure we're experiencing there is what I call an industrial pleasure. Like, wow, can you believe how long they worked on that? Can you believe how much talent they have? Whereas, in this case, when they look down at the end of the street and they see a bunch of brush strokes, but after they gaze upon it for just a second or two, their brain says, that's light passing through between tree trunks and lampposts and so on. That's sunlight hitting at the end of a street there. In other words, their brain finishes the picture. I contend that what their mind is experiencing at that point is actually a higher a degree of aesthetic pleasure. Okay, I get going on that so often, and part of the reason that I do, I hope you understand, is because I was fairly late. It was very late in my career. I had been a full-time professional artist for decades before that light bulb really came on. And again, you can see my realistic, in fact, I still do realism just for fun sometimes, because it is fun to me. So, and I feel like that's important. And that's part of the reason why I have authority to compare realism versus abstract realism, which is what I call this, because I have done years and years of realism. And you go to dannelsonart.com and look at my illustration page, or look at my portrait page, or look at my automotive painting, which I still love doing. My goodness, if I woke up tomorrow morning and I discovered that I could sell realistic automotive paintings as fast as I could paint them, I would do it. If I found out I could make $1 million in the next 10 years doing realistic paintings, I would do it in a heartbeat. Why? Because I like the money. Plus, it would leave me with spare time to do what I really want to do, which would be this kind of artwork. But I would gladly. Are you kidding? I ain't crazy. Well, I am crazy, but not now. Happy. I am happy with this. There's a little dark mark right there that I'm changing my mind about. Just about time for me to start working somewhere else, simply because if I get bogged down in too small an area of the painting for too long, I'll, just like portrait blindness, I'll get blind to it, and I won't be seeing objectively anymore. So I'm going to leave that for a minute because I've been working on it long enough. I'm in danger of developing a blindness to it. I'm not really discerning anymore. I'm having too much fun is another way to put it. And so let me come back to that later. Let's focus on something else. Okay, one of the things I really want to do that I felt like was part of what made this scene work the other day, and again, for those of you who just tuned in, perhaps, Here is my one of my reference photos. I did this painting, of course, on location, on plein air. But of course, I took several pictures because there's always a chance you won't finish. And so I have this to look at, and that's a big help at this point. One of the things that made me feel like this scene worked, one of the things that appealed to me, of course, there was a lot of green foliage, and I'm quite happy with that right now. You'll notice I took this tree and cut it back. This tree actually comes down to about here, and I cut it back, a whole row of trees actually, so that we could see the top of that dome down there. And I'm going to go right now, and there we go. Just a hint of a flagpole at the end, at the top of that dome. There we go. One of the things that made this work, even though there was a lot of green, was the fact that there were these American flags, especially on this side of the street. Boom, 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 getting smaller as they go away. And one American flag right there. And in fact, these two banners, and this is realistic. There was in fact a lamp here with two banners on it. If those weren't there, I feel like this painting would be significantly diminished in its visual impact. In fact, I've got here the backside of a sign, like, you know, a no parking or a whatever. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be just a gray silver sign, and I won't. It's almost finished. I won't do much to it. But the fact that these items, the lamp, the banners, the sign, and the flags, are what is called in the graphic arts business violating the trees. In other words, they're breaking up the tree images is very important. So I want to go ahead and let's get those flags in particular, get those knocked out. And I've done many times on my broadcast here, I've talked about how to paint the American flag. And if you're not from America, or the United States, I should say, if you're not from the United States, then of course you can translate this into how to paint textured fabric. So it's not just flags, but of course, since I do live in the United States and I do a lot of plein air paintings in cities, then I end up, just by default, I end up doing a lot of American flags. So I've developed, now all of these flags are quite far away, and it's a lot harder to do far away flags than it is up close flags. Up close is easy. So I'm starting with the easiest one right here, that one and this one over here. The way I paint American flags is in layers. So as you can see, all of that work was done in the acrylic phase. And now I'm just ghosting in some slightly dark, slightly dirty red. It's not very bright. Okay, and I tried to nail that down, but I overdid. These back here need to be a little bit lighter because of atmospheric perspective. This one too. Okay, that's about right. That's about right, I think. Time will tell. The next few minutes will tell. Principle. We like to see bits of the object spill into the background, and bits of the background spill into the object. Let me repeat. We like to see bits of the object, flag, spill into the background, green trees. And we like to see bits of the background, green trees, violating itself into the object, flag. So you'll notice there's like a halo around all of these. Again, I achieved that in very rapid painting in the acrylic stage. I didn't sweat over that. It was not a lot of work. I didn't have to sweat and strain and strive. Nope, I just slapped it down pretty quickly. A green, especially in the fuzz layer. Not a green, a red halo of sorts. a red fuzz. This is the only one of the flags, I think, that's going to have any kind of, or much, distinct stripes at all. And even there, I have to be very careful not to overdo it. By the way, you may do, again, to you my fellow Americans, my fellow Yanks, it's not terribly difficult to keep track of the stripes. It's very logical. If you have a flag, think about it with me. Put on your graphic designer hat. If you have a flag that has red and white stripes, do you want, at the edge of the flag, do you want that last stripe to be white or red? The answer is obvious. You want it to be red. You don't want a white stripe at the edge of the flag. And if you don't understand why, then you don't have graphic design intuition. And that's okay. Maybe you're not supposed to, but everybody that thinks graphically, thinks designerly, you don't want white at the end. You want, okay, so all the outside stripes are always red. Now, next to the blue field, right next to the dark blue, do you want a red stripe or a white stripe? Thinking like a graphic designer. Next to the dark blue, do you want a red or a white? Again, really obvious. You do not want red and you do not want dark blue and red abutting each other. That's very painful visually. So of course, next to the blue field is white. So it's white, red, white, red, white, red, white, red, white, red. There's 3 reds down here. and then you just follow the rest of the flag. Anyway, I rarely, if ever, count to make sure I've got 13 stripes. But if I'm doing a flag up close, it's very easy because of there's principles of graphic design. Next to the blue field is a white stripe, and on the outside of the flag are red stripes. So it just comes out naturally. 13. I think it was over 15 or 17 stripes. I probably have to count. Okay, so you see, I've just smudged in some white stuff back here. Too much right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and change gears for just a minute. The same dirty brushes, without cleaning them. Pick up some ultramarine, and I guess a tiny bit of phthalo. I was debating. And again, just sort of ghost in. You see where my brush is going? Okay? Again, most of you, if you're a student, if you're a beginner painter, almost every beginner painter says, I'm too tight, I wish I were looser. That certainly is my journey, and that is most people's journey. So, look at where my brush is going. I'm painting a blue corner of a flag. I'm not pushing down very hard, but I created a blue aura. In fact, a blue cloud around the top corner of those flags. And by making my brush do all those crazy, rather counterintuitive movements. That's what you guys need to do if you're a beginner and you want to get looser. Yeah, just paint looser. Here's one of the things. I taught a class many years ago, and the full title was, do you really want to get loose, or are you just saying that? That's my favorite class title I've ever done. Sorry, forgive me while I laugh and brag at myself and laugh at my own joke. But hardly anybody saw it, so that's why I have to broadcast it, because I'm not exactly famous for that brilliant title. But the title was, do you really want to get loose, or are you just saying that? Because, alas, many art students are saying that because they've heard that they're supposed to want to be loose. So they say, well, I know I'm supposed to be loose, but I really don't get it. And that's the point of my class, is to try to explain and demonstrate why loose is better. The real reason most people don't paint loose is because even though they've heard that loose is better, they don't really believe it. And again, I didn't either. I did not either for decades, perhaps, until the day that suddenly an epiphany, a light bulb came on. And I discovered that loose really was better. I'm not going to go into that journey, how the light bulb came on, but it was a definite turning point. And of course, ever since then, as you can tell, I've had the zeal of a convert. There is no zeal like that of a convert, right? So I've had that zeal ever since. You can tell because I talk about it so often. Why is abstract realism, which is my preferred description for this technique, preferred over impressionism, why is abstract realism the superior way to paint? And again, that's the way Rembrandt, the father of us all, Frans Hals, John Singer Sargent, to a more way extreme degree, Vincent van Gogh. He's an extreme example. Okay, so I just did my second layer of white. I'm going to do it was a third layer of white, but now I'm going to do a third layer of red. So I'm mixing up a cleaner, brighter red, maybe pure Scarlet Lake. And forgive me, I know this is awfully small. Let me bring you down here real close just for a minute so I can explain to you what's going on here. You see I did white here, here, here in a row this way. I didn't do long white stripes. These are kind of long, but you see I did, hang on, sorry for the earthquake. I did white there, there, and there. Not there, there, and there. See, in between, this is a one layer underneath. This is a dirty white, but this is cleaner here, here, and here, and here, here, and here. Now, if I can hold this and paint at the same time, I'm going to put bright red stripes right between the bright bits of the white stripe. Do you see? Now the whole flag goes from bright, dim, bright, dim, bright, dim. I'm using the word dim. Dull, bright, dull, dull. So again, this is how to paint striped material, especially if you want it to look like it's blowing in the breeze the way a flag would. And I'm probably done with that part of that flag. And all the other flags going back from there are much more abstract than that one. Also slightly paler red. Red is one of those colors that suffers the assault of atmosphere more dramatically than other colors. By the way, just for what it's worth, so far in this painting I don't have any row of streetlights, but I will come back and add those. Should have added them before now, but I can add them late because they're bits of light. Atmospheric perspective does not impact lights nearly as much as it impacts everything else. So if you're ever painting a row, of streetlights, and you say, well, as they go further away, they get more blue. The answer is, nah, not really. Not really. I think I'm pretty close to done with this flag, with these flags. Yeah, not really. Things that are glowing do not suffer the effects of atmospheric perspective nearly the way things that are merely reflecting light. The distant purple mountain majesty is not a purple light bulb. It's just a reflecting light. That's why it looks purple. But if there was a super intense light on that mountain, it wouldn't be purple. It would be whatever color that the light is shining. Okay, very, very close to finished with these flags. The hard part is keeping them abstract enough, keeping them messy enough, but still looking like flags. I'm going to come back and do the field of blue. I've talked about this before too. Here's a counterintuitive detail about painting the flag. Counterintuitive. You paint the stars first, then you come back and paint the blue around the stars. The opposite of what your intuition would tell you. Why? Because then, well, I already said it already this afternoon. Anytime you can paint something in the negative instead of in the positive, do it. Anytime you can paint a detail that's further away, but put the paint on top of the detail thing that's closer up, like sky holes, our eyes get a kick out of that. I'm going to stop there on the flags, and in fact, I'm going to stop there, take a little break. Hey gang, I was going to paint a little bit longer without paint things that are glowing red, like taillights and stoplights, and realized I somehow interrupted myself and never finished that thought. So I started doing two things, taillights here and stoplights, traffic lights up here, and then decided to stop and bring you in. So if you look, in both cases, I've done just my first haze. Now I could have done this in the acrylic stage, of course, but I didn't. So what I've done is just my first layer of very dark and red. In fact, I still have it here on my palette. There, see that right there? So I just ghosted that in. I won't do it now because I've got a different color, but you know, my brushes were going like this. There's going to be a traffic light right about there, but my brushes are covering an area about 3 by 3 inches. Same thing here for the tail light. Okay, so now that's layer number one. Layer number two, I'm mixing up a slightly lighter, brighter, whiter. You understand why I do that, right? I want to convey, make clear. I'm not, it's a lighter color by adding white. Okay, so it's still a medium. Let me see, I think I want it redder than that. Okay, and I'm going to haze in, ghost in a slightly smaller area than I did the first time. So I'm not making my brushes go quite as crazy as I did the first time. Just painting just the glow again. And this is, by the way, a universal principle. Whenever you want to paint anything that looks like it's glowing, you paint the glow first and then the thing that's glowing. For instance, like a candle flame of a candle. You paint the glow first and paint the flame last. Same thing here. You paint the aura around the traffic light first, and the very last thing we're going to paint is the traffic light, so to speak. Okay, so again, this time even a lighter, brighter, whiter, more light, more bright red, and painting still a fuzzy area, but a smaller fuzzy area. And yes, it's easier to do this using two hands, because if you use one hand, it's harder to stay loose. Your one hand wants to get really, really fussy. Okay? Getting close. Now, I'm going to make a significant shift, picking up quite a bit of red. Quite a bit of white. I didn't mean red at all. I meant white. And some yellow. In this case, I'm doing a permanent yellow light. So I've got a color on my palette that's very much like a salmon, bright red salmon color. Not done yet. Now, in fact, I think I want that to be softer. I'm going to paint with my finger for a minute. To be even messier than it is. Okay? I don't know how many more layers. Maybe just one, or possibly 2 layers. Again, I'm wiping off, wasting lots of paint, unfortunately. Not too much, honest, come on. And picking up more titanium white, mixing it with this red and more yellow. See, if you just do white, you get a very bubblegum pink color. And that's not a pleasant color, so you add yellow to it to warm it up. Again, a peach color, I would call this at this point. And yes, there are 2 traffic lights, 2 red lights. I think it's pretty typical in much of the world. Aha. I'm going to do something for my friendly fan brush. They're just down here. I decided that was just a little too intense, so I smeared out. And while I'm at it, I'm going to give a faint impression that the tail light is actually shining back a little bit. Either that or that the car is moving, one or the other. But I'm now suggesting that it's a directional light. It's not just a glowing light, it's actually a light that's shooting out, so to speak. Now, let me come in here and redo the center of that again, a little bit brighter. Yeah, now one last time. More titanium white, not quite completely mixed on my brushes. I was going to do that left-handed. There you go. So there are red lights that look like they're glowing. Now here's a funny thing about that. When you and I are standing out on the street looking at traffic, either taillights or stoplights, when we're standing in reality looking, they do not look like this. You and I, with our naked eye, these lights are red right down to the absolute center. They do not turn orange and white like I just painted them. Here, this is a weird thing. I do not know the answer to this question. I do not know the answer to this question. Here's the question. Do we, human beings, now, do we perceive this as a glowing red light? And come on, admit it. You do. That looks that looks like a red light that's glowing, doesn't it? But do we perceive that because of photography? Because any camera in the world that takes a picture of a bright red light, the camera will do this. The camera turns it white in the center with a red aura, that and that. So my question is, do human beings now, is it because of the ubiquitous nature, it's everywhere, because of the ubiquity, is that a word? Because of the everywhere-ness of photography, is that how we now? But I tell you, if you try to do it any other way, if you make these lights red at the very center, they won't look bright. They will not look like they're bright lights. They will look like dark red blobs of some kind. They're bright red, but they won't look like they're lights that are shining. And this is not unique to me by any means. Same thing is true of the headlights. Now, while I was gone, when I came back to my painting a few minutes ago, I realized that this car down here, these headlights also could be blended a lot more than they are. So here I am again painting with my fingers. I usually say don't ever paint with your fingers. What I really mean is mostly don't use toxic pigments and paint with your fingers. Thankfully, there are no cobalts or cadmiums on my palette, so I feel pretty confident that I'm pretty safe. Having smeared, I'm going to smear it again with my brush this time. Yeah, there we go. Whoops, too much. Too much of a good thing. But I'm doing basically the same trick that I did with the taillights, just that the aura around this is a warm white light instead of red. I still have a long way to go on this painting, as you can see, and I don't want to bore my viewers to tears. So I'm not sure how much more I should keep broadcasting. I'll do just a little bit. Let's tackle the since I've already got a warm orange mixed up down here, let's tackle the storefront lights, which, by the way, this in our town of Raleigh is sadly somewhat fictitious. There are not enough commercial properties with lights on throughout the night in downtown Raleigh. Here again, doing basically the same thing I did with the tail lights, but in this case the glow was rendered in the acrylic phase, and I'm just coming in here and just hitting maybe the final couple touches of light. Another little trick, you see me doing it here, interspersed with the glow, fuzzy atmospheric lights. Interspersed with that, here and there, are little bits of light that have hard edges. Not too many, but a few hard edges, just here and there and here and there. Now I'm going to mix up a darker orange. I could have done this earlier, but I'm mixing up a darker orange because I want to do some. It's not dark enough. I want to do some hints of lights a little bit higher up in the trees. I've already pointed out, if you weren't here, let me repeat it. I've already pointed out this is not a literal painting. There's an incongruity happening here. If these lights were actually showed up to this degree of intensity, the sky shouldn't ought to be this bright. The sky should be darker than this for this to be realistic. But very few people, and pretty much only my fellow artists, will see that. Everybody else will experience it as, oh, isn't that, oh, I love the light. One of my favorite, in fact I have a page of his stuff here. One of my favorite masters of this effect is in fact G. Harvey. This is several pages of things that I did a couple months ago. Just searches online for some of my favorite cityscape painters. Richard Schmid, Eugene Gallienne Lalouet, early 20th century French Paris painter. Another one, same guy, lots of paintings. And somewhere in here, let me turn these over, is Jeremy Mann, certainly. 2 pages of Jeremy Mann. And here G. Harvey. So again, just if you want to, and then T. Bournet, that's all of them. And G. Harvey, one of the best at this, the glow of evening lights. All of these, isn't that nice? Now you might say that that's overly nostalgic, overly sentimental. I can understand you saying that. And I'm certainly not, I don't think I'm doing it anywhere near to the degree that they are. But I take note, as you can tell. I've not only taken note, but printed off copies of all of their artwork. Jeremy Mann does the same thing. I don't think anyone would accuse him realistically of being overly romantic or nostalgic. Just the fact is, our eyes get a kick out of color. No, our eyes get a kick out of light. That's what I meant to say. Sorry, the last second I was thinking color. That's probably enough detail in that. All of a sudden now, I see that my trees up here that are supposed to look as though they're catching sunlight, I see now that they could actually be brighter than they are. They looked bright when I did them, but compared to the things that are happening now, they don't look bright enough. That's the way it goes, right? Totally legal, acceptable. Hey Mark, thank you, man. Appreciate it. I'm liking it too. I have about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks left to decide which paintings to enter into the Oil Painters of America Southeast Regional Show. And if I happen to do a painting that I like better than other things I have on hand, then I can enter two. So whichever are my two favorite paintings in the next week and a half, I will enter my two favorites into Oil Painters of America Southeast Regional. OPA, Oil Painters of America, is the granddaddy of them all, in my opinion. Comparable to the Portrait Society of America, which is the granddaddy of them all in portraiture. By that I mean the highest competition, the highest level of competition, the highest level of quality, and so on. It's OPA, Oil Painters of America. I'm going to stop there because basically I want to paint by myself for a little while. What I did over here, I'm going to do over here. I'm going to be careful not to make it look too much like this. That would be in competition. So this is going to have to be either more tight, a little bit more hard edge, a little bit, or softer, one or the other. I don't know which. And of course, I've got these banners to do, this sign to do. You don't need to watch me do that. One of the big issues that I still have in front of me is this car right here. And as you can see, I have a photograph of the car. And when I came back to this painting and looked at the photograph, I see some errors in drawing. So I'm going to fix those along these lines, long lines of what I'm doing right now. And again, this is one of the little conveniences of using a pencil, right? For some reason, I don't know why, it's just a little bit easier to draw things with a liney tool than it is with a brushy tool. I think that will do it right there. I think, oh, no, there we go. So I'm going to shape up mainly this edge. That won't be too difficult. And again, I want this car to stay very, very subtle. So I'm going to keep it dark and neutral tone because it's not a scene about this car, but this car has to be here. I feel like it has to be here. If there was an empty parking space here, every city dweller in the world would go, that ain't real. They would say, there's no parking places like that. Okay, I'm exaggerating probably, but anyway, that's what it feels like to me. I have a pencil in my hand, so once again, I've been doing more of this lately. A little bit of wet paint right there that I can smudge around. Okay, I'll bring you back in before I finish the painting, but I don't know, it's getting pretty close to supper time, I think. Thanks for your company. Hey Donna, sorry I missed your comment earlier, your chat comment. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm liking this too. That's right. It is evening when the lights first come on. You know, I'm exaggerating the differential between the sky and the ground level somewhat. I'm hoping I can get away with it. I am very close to finished. have been fiddling for some time. I took a nice long break, practiced my trumpet. This is essentially finished. I basically just have this car and these pedestrians to go. A little bit of work on that car. I'm not sure that that window is supposed to be that bright. So let me do that for now. Yeah, that's better. A little bit of a curb appeal. Right there. Okay, let's work on this up close automobile. Once again, I have a picture of the particular car. I don't want it. Yeah, I don't want people to look at the painting and try to identify the make. That would be counterproductive to my purposes, I think. But fortunately, it's a Honda. It's a middle-aged, not a new Honda. So Hondas are pretty ubiquitous. Pretty much you find them everywhere. So that helps. It's good. It's a good, typical car, quote unquote. Okay, I've just mixed up some dark transparent. I made a few little changes to the drawing near the end of one of my last broadcasts today. And now I'm doing some dark drawing with transparent, neutral colored stuff. Not too dark. Again, I don't want this car to jump off the page and scream at the viewer. This painting is not about the car, but I feel there has to be a car up this close. So I hope I've learned a trick. That is to say, I think I've learned a trick, and I hope it works for doing things like this. For doing cars that are up too close. They have to be there, but you don't want them to draw too much attention. So the answer is you do it all, first of all, kind of messy, a little bit messy. That's the crazy part. Messy but accurate. Does that make sense? The lines can't be too precise, but they need to be in precisely the right place. It cannot be at this range, this close range. I can't afford to have a poorly rendered car. But at the same time, I can't afford to have a car that has sharp edges. So I want to keep the edges kind of soft whenever possible, and the contrasts quite muted. So in other words, not too many contrasting. So even the dark that I'm doing right now is not as dark as it could be, and the lights that I'll do in a few minutes, likewise, not as light as they could be. So the whole thing's sort of a neutral. Okay, wait, there's a few more strokes. Top of the license plate. Okay. I think I can get away with not cleaning these brushes, just wiping them off. And then let's do the lights. It's always, of course, the rule is lights first, darks last. And that is one of the rules that I violate least frequently. That's one of them, I think, one of the pretty hard and fast. And that is not a Dan Nelsonism. That is not unique to me. That's plain old ancient art professor thinking. Okay, I want to mix up right now a very mid-tone, dull, dirty red. Very dull and very dirty. So reddish brown. Because I'm hoping, I want it to sort of look like a red car. There's so much red up here that I discovered that I could get away with more red in this vehicle than I originally thought. Okay, here we go. Dirty red color. And one of the things I want to do is actually diminish some of the texture that is showing through this car in the drips and so forth. I like drips. You have to keep them in balance. Not too much drips, not too many drips. And there's a bit too many here for my taste, so I'm going to cover them up somewhat with a translucent. Yeah, see just a little bit of a red glow there. It's really very brown, a reddish brown glow. Same thing here. Now, am I making the car to show up too much? Yes, I am. Okay? It's simply because it's too red. So I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to this mixture to gray it down quite a bit. And some Indian yellow to make it closer to the color of the road, the street right here. Let's see how that does. First I want to see if I'm close to the color of the road. That would help. Too dark. Okay, that helps to know. Let's lighten this up a little bit. Oh, now it's just a straight out brown. What color brown? I'm not trying to think of it, not an artistic term, but almost a melted chocolate ice cream brown. The cheap ice cream that you get at a grocery store, not fancy chocolate ice cream, just the cheap stuff. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so early in the process, when I was talking about this car and the problem that it presented, the challenge that it presented, being so close in the composition, that one of the tricks I have learned just in recent years is to, when you have to do something, that an object that's up close, so it has to be there, so to speak, but you don't want it to get much attention, you pretend it's a chameleon, right? A chameleon is an animal that changes color to match its background, to match what it's standing on, right? And that's exactly what I'm doing right here. I'm essentially making the car, and again with marks that are not too neat. I'm making the car the color of the road right here. Do you see? So you can see the car, but it doesn't scream at you. It's the only thing I can't stand. It's a screaming car. Okay, let me think. That's probably enough of that pale brown. Let me add a little bit of lightness to it. Just a little bit lighter here along the fender, on the hood. Now, as it goes toward the corner, I think the whole picture gets darker, the painting gets darker. So I'm likewise, in chameleon fashion, I'm going to make the car get darker. So I'm adding some raw umber and some ultramarine blue. I'm afraid YouTube's going to be able to hear that music. Let me turn it down a bit. There we go. Come in.
Dinner time.
Okay, thanks. Be there soon. Finally, dinner time. Yeehaw. Okay. Are you seeing? I'm going to have to come back and do more, but the effect, I think, is being generally successful. I can come back. I can do dark light, dark light, dark light as many times as I want. The main thing is that the darks are not too dark, the lights are not too light, the edges are not too sharp, but it's an accurate rendering of a car. That's the tricky part. That is the tricky part. Now, I'm going to add some blue right before I run downstairs and eat supper. I'm going to add some blue. Again, because see this blue in the road up here? The painting has a bluer haze right here. So I want the car, likewise, to fade to a bluer color. Even there at the top of the this dark area doesn't need to be quite this dark. So let's mess this up. Thank you. My wife says it's beautiful. It's nice because I don't pay her anything to say that. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. I'll come back and finish this, hopefully, this evening. And thanks again for your company. Car and then pedestrians, and same thing will happen, same thing with the pedestrians. They need to be anatomically pretty accurate but not tight. Accurate and muted tones. This painting is not about these three people walking across the street. They're just part of the choreography of the scene, the backdrop. They are not what the painting is about. So likewise, they're already very neutral tone. They will stay that way. I almost would like people, when they look at this painting, to see these things second. They look here and go, oh look, and there's people in a car. Got it? So I'm pretty happy with how that's happening. And the principle, the word chameleon is just really the best way to describe this trick.